Good morning, and thank you for joining our webinar to learn more about ERA's participation in the Clean Energy Transition Partnership Joint Call 2025. My name is Isabella Tarasco, and I'm the Technology Investment Lead here at Emissions Reduction Alberta, or ERA. Today, I am joined by Chris Owttrim, ERA's Executive Director of Technology and Innovation. Thank you for logging into this important webinar. Before we all get into the agenda, I'd like to start by going through a few housekeeping items just to make sure we get the most out of our time today. First of all, we're expecting a lot of participants today, so everyone's microphone is muted to avoid unintentional background noise. If you encounter technical challenges related to the webinar connection, please email Neil at nwhedon@eralberta.ca and we will try to help you if we can. However, if you can't resolve your technical issues or if you need to leave early, we will be posting a recording of this webinar on our website as well as the slide deck. It will be uploaded on our webpage for the Joint Call 2025, which is linked off our funding page. The recording will include both the presentation and the live Q&A with audio. Speaking of the Q&A, in the top right of your screen, you'll notice a question mark icon. Clicking this will open a side panel where you can type in your questions. Please do not enter questions into the comments section, and all questions will be addressed at the end of the slide deck. In terms of an agenda for today, we have 1 hour together. First, I'll talk briefly about ERA and our mandate. Next, Chris will provide an overview of the Joint Call 2025, and we'll cover some key points regarding scope and eligibility for the call, the submission process, and the timelines around the funding decision. Finally, we'll end off by answering some of your questions. So if you have any questions, please type them into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel as we go. I will answer as many questions as we can, but if we don't address your question, you're welcome to follow up with us afterwards through the applications inbox, which will be posted at the end of the webinar. So a little bit about ERA. Since 2009, we've invested the proceeds from Alberta's industrial carbon price on large emitters to reduce emissions, improve environmental outcomes, and strengthen the competitiveness of new and existing industries in Alberta. Our funding is sourced from organizations who are required to reduce their emissions to meet regulated targets under the Government of Alberta's TIER regulation. We offer a clear line of sight from these funds to the investments in the technology solutions needed to help achieve emissions reductions and economic growth. Our vision is for Alberta to have competitive industries that deliver sustainable environmental outcomes and attract investment. I will also flag that ERA is now looking at projects and technologies with additional environmental benefits that go beyond emissions reductions. These include improved water management, soil and groundwater remediation, reduced land use or disturbance, and the reduction of other air pollutants. And we do this all with a lean and low-cost administration, providing good value for Albertans. So far, we've committed $970 million towards 306 projects worth more than $7 billion total. Our investments are helping bring innovative technologies to life, including first-of-kind geothermal projects, the world's first hydrogen-powered heavy-duty freight locomotive, repurposing agricultural waste to create sustainable high-value products, scaling innovation in Alberta's concrete sector while reducing emissions, and many more. It's important to note that ERA always requires a one-to-one investment from private sources. Advancing these technologies requires more than just public funding. We require industry engagement and investment, which are essential to achieving success and demonstrate market demand for some of these products. Historically, we've significantly exceeded this requirement. Every dollar invested by ERA, almost $6.50 is invested by private funders. This proves that market demand is key to gaining industry confidence and encouraging investment. Our modeling shows that our projects are supporting the creation of jobs in Alberta as well as the rest of Canada. By 2027, we estimate over 46,000 person-year jobs will be created, adding an additional $6.9 billion to our GDP as well. This number rises to over 63,000 jobs in Canada and over $9 billion to the nation's GDP. This is the kind of momentum that fuels a stronger, more resilient, and more competitive economy. Having a diverse portfolio, both in terms of timelines and technologies and sectors, is critical. You'll see here that our investments largely align with some of the largest sources of emissions in Alberta: oil sands, electricity, transportation, forestry, agriculture, and much more. However, what's also important to note here is that we do fund a balanced portfolio of projects. We look for successful potential projects across all sectors and all industries in the province. Also looking at some of those new industries that may come up that we can support some technology de-risking and innovation. Commercialization is the bridge that transforms innovative ideas and research into practical, marketable products and solutions. It encourages continuous improvement and adaptation, ensuring that the technologies evolve to meet real-world needs and challenges. Several of ERA's projects have reached commercialization to date. The largest proportion of commercialized projects are in the oil and gas sector. There's been lots of great success in cement and concrete as well, electricity, oil sands, and so on. Commercialized technologies contribute significantly to economic growth by creating new industries and job opportunities. And they also attract investment, both from private and public sectors, fueling further economic activity. By supporting and investing in the clean technology projects, ERA helps ensure that groundbreaking technologies reach their full potential and that Alberta is showcased as a leader in both creating some of these opportunities and leading the charge in commercializing these projects. So I'll now turn it over to Chris to talk about our participation in the Clean Energy Transition Partnership Joint Call 2025.
Thanks so much, Isabella. So we're here today, as you just said, to talk about the Clean Energy Transition Partnership Joint Call 2025. So first off, what is the Clean Energy Transition Partnership? This is a European-based initiative that brings together national and regional programs focused on research, development, and innovation. It includes participants from both EU member states and non-EU countries such as Canada. 30 countries are part of this multilateral effort, and each year the partners pool their resources for a joint funding call to support a wide range of clean energy technologies. The CET partnership is aligned with the European Strategic Energy Technology Plan, which aims to help Europe achieve climate neutrality by 2050. So in many ways, it's a European reflection of ERA's role in delivering on the Government of Alberta's mandate to reduce emissions here at home. And their priorities when it comes to technology development, emissions reductions, and economic competitiveness are very well aligned with ours. So in January 2022, ERA joined the CET partnership as a regional partner and has participated in every joint call since. And we're very proud to be the only Canadian funding agency at the table, providing opportunities for Albertan and Canadian innovators and researchers to access this international funding pool. Unlike some of ERA's other funding calls, this funding call has a number of different streams that are led and administered by the EU and the CET Partnership Administration. So each joint call is driven by 7 transition initiatives, or what are called TRIs. TRIs are collaborative groups of CET partnership members that are focused on advancing specific clean energy technologies and solutions. The TRIs are the core working bodies of the CET partnership, and their responsibilities include defining the call modules, which include the specific topics for each joint call, leading stakeholder engagement and communications within those focus areas, and supporting knowledge sharing and activities that maximize the impact of funded projects. So again, a lot of things that we here at ERA are used to, just at an international level. For the 2025 joint call, there are 10 call modules under the 7 TRIs. ERA is providing funding for 5 of them that are particularly well aligned with Alberta's opportunities and priorities. So these include energy system flexibility, energy production, storage, and system integration, advanced renewable energy technologies for power production, so things like geothermal and other novel renewables, with innovation and research-oriented approaches, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, hydrogen and other renewable fuels, and lastly, heating and cooling technologies for buildings and industry. So to be funded by ERA through the CET Partnership Joint Call, your project must be aligned with one of these funding modules. When you go to the CET Partnership application, which we'll talk about more in subsequent slides, you will be required to select one module that best fits your project. We know that projects may fit more than one module, and so if you do need help navigating that program or indicating where you might best align, we're happy to provide you with some advice and support on that front. So over the next 4 slides, I'll walk you through the technologies covered in the modules that ERA is supporting in this year's joint call. But for a more detailed overview of the requirements, I strongly recommend reviewing the CETP Joint Call 2025 guidelines, which tell you everything you need to know in great detail and really go down into the weeds of what the CET partners are looking for in each of these technology research initiatives. Keep in mind, while all proposals must meet the CET partnership requirements, ERA also applies its own eligibility and technology alignment criteria. So again, if you're unsure about where your project fits or if it's the type of thing that ERA would support through CETP, please reach out to our applications team. And again, we'll share those contact details at the end of the presentation. So getting into the 5 modules that ERA supports, and again, you'll see these listed among all of the CETP joint call modules. The first one we are bringing into eligibility is Module 2, which is related to key aspects of the clean energy transition, ranging from large-scale integration of renewable energy sources into power grids, supporting approaches towards system integration, and looking at storage as a possible solution to deal with intermittency and other necessary grid services. So targeted areas for investment in this module include large-scale renewable energy generation, improving system reliability, improving flexibility and integration of variable renewable energy sources, innovation in energy storage technologies, utility scale storage systems for flexibility, and system stability assessments. In modules 3A and 3B, we're really looking at advanced renewable energy technologies for generation of power. The difference is that 3A focuses on research-oriented projects or approaches rather, ROA, while 3B focuses on innovation-oriented approaches or IOA. So this is the difference between earlier stage R&D and projects that are closer to deployment and demonstration. To get a better sense of that difference, please visit the guidelines document for details, but at a high level, the same technologies are eligible in both these 2 modules. They include things like linear solar power plant technology, geothermal energy for power applications, next generation wind energy systems, and storage solutions for renewable power. And so between module 2, which is really focused on the grid and energy systems, and modules 3A and 3B, which is really focused on generation, we're hoping to see a great wealth of grid and electricity projects come forward in this year's joint call. Module 4 is something that'll be familiar to folks that are familiar with ERA's past participation in the joint calls, as well as the prior accelerating carbon capture technologies challenges. Module 4 is all about carbon capture, utilization, and storage. The idea is to support projects that will develop and implement CCUS technologies to hit identified timelines and targets, and therefore they must include industrial involvement in the project. We're really looking at taking CCUS to that next level of industrial integration and deployment. This module supports research and innovation projects to develop and implement those technologies, again, with that focus on the industrial and energy sectors. And so the technologies that are eligible include CO2 capture from the energy sector and energy intensive and other heavy industry sectors, advancing lower cost CO2 capture technologies for various flue gas streams. Again, this sort of need for next generation carbon capture is something we're very keen on exploring here at ERA. As well, this module includes things like CO2 transport and storage infrastructure, so really the full life cycle of carbon management after it's been captured. And lastly, advancement of carbon dioxide removal or CDR technologies, again, trying to bring those closer to market readiness. Module 5, which is the 4th module ERA supporting under this program, is related to hydrogen and renewable fuels. So this is all about other low carbon energy carriers, and it aims to advance new and improved technologies to drive the transition to decarbonized energy sources via increasing supply of alternative energy and these renewable fuels. Example technologies include new and improved processes for hydrogen production and production of renewable fuels like biofuels and sustainable aviation fuel, reliable and low-cost production technologies for those new and advanced fuels, development of new processes and new supply chains for fuel production, and secure and safe storage and transport of hydrogen, which is becoming a big topic in Europe, I think, as folks are aware. Finally, Module 6 is an area that we're excited to add to our offering of eligible areas this time around. This module is all focused on next generation heating and cooling technologies that are more robust, affordable, and energy efficient, with the goal of creating solutions that are easier to install, retrofit, and integrate into existing energy systems. So the target technologies in this module include innovative approaches for geothermal heating and cooling from shallow and deeper subsurface, new storage technologies and storage-related innovations. So again, that's relating to primarily thermal energy storage for buildings. And then heating and cooling conversion and integration for more cost-efficient heating and cooling, including things like district energy networks. So that's the technical requirements. And again, under Clean Energy Transition Partnership, you must align with one of those 5 modules in order to apply for ERA funding. The other key thing that's different from a typical ERA funding competition is that CETP Joint Call 2025 has significant consortium requirements that you also must adhere to in order to be eligible. This program is aimed at fostering international collaboration. And so for that reason, CETP is all about fostering and ultimately requiring these project consortiums. What that means practically is that each project must have 3 eligible independent entities from at least 3 different countries or regions. In other words, to apply for the joint call, your project must have 3 partners from 3 countries. These countries or regions can participate in CET partnership, but consortia with other countries that are not part of the partnership are welcome too. However, 2 of these partners must be EU member states or associated with Horizon Europe. Canada, of course, is one of the countries associated with Horizon Europe, and so it would meet one of those 2 requirements. Those consortia can consist of partners from industry, local and regional governments, post-secondary institutions, research organizations, and NGOs. And so it's really important to think about what sort of complete consortium you'll need to bring your project to life. And it's often helpful to think about bringing together partnerships representing sort of one of each. So maybe an industry partner, a technology developer, and then a research organization. These are the types of consortiums that we've seen be very successful in CETP in the past. It's also important to note that the total effort of a partner from one country or region cannot exceed 75% of the total project work. Again, we're not just looking for token partnerships in this program, we're really looking for meaningful impact that's bringing together partners from across the participating countries. So I really encourage you to check out the CET Partnerships webpage for more information on the consortium requirements. They have a community of researchers, organizations, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and more. And over the years, they've developed a strong matchmaking platform with nearly 5,000 participants. And so at a minimum, accessing that website will be a great place to start thinking about how you're going to build your consortium and pull together the right partners, both to deliver the project and to fund the project in order to meet the CETP eligibility requirements. So I really do encourage you to check that out and make use of that matchmaking platform to find project partners and collaboration opportunities to really help you build a consortium that will bring you the greatest success. Let's shift the focus now to the ERA-specific funding opportunity within this joint call. So again, ERA is eligible to be one of your 3 funders on the call, and we're representing the Canada and Alberta region under this CET partnership. First and foremost, ERA is always looking to fund well-defined projects with a capital P. So those are initiatives with clear goals, set milestones, specific timelines, concrete deliverables, and a detailed budget. So we're not looking to fund open-ended research programs or other initiatives that maybe don't focus on a specific project. Our goal is to help technology move along the path towards commercialization. And so we don't fund ongoing operations or open-ended initiatives, as I just said, but we are really looking for a specific scope with a clear start and a clear end date and a clear advancement towards technology commercialization. Talking a bit about project timelines, there are a few key dates you're going to want to keep in mind. So for CET Partnership Joint Call 2025, the pre-proposal, so the first stage of applications, are due in early October of this year. Full proposals will be open in January 2026 for shortlisted applicants and will be due by mid-March of next year. And funding decisions will be made around this time in 2026, so just about 1 year from now. What that means is that projects that you're looking to apply to this funding competition should have an intended start date somewhere between September and mid-December of next year. That's quite a bit of time to pull together a proposal and get those consortiums ready, but we know that that does take a lot of time, so we do encourage you to start now. When it comes to ERA-specific timelines, what we're looking for specifically is that the development, design, construction, and commissioning of a technology must occur within a 3-year period, again, from that late 2026 start date. And so we'd be looking for projects notionally to complete sometime in late 2029 at the latest. We'll get more into the timelines later, but again, given the need to pull together the resources and an appropriate eligible project consortium, we really encourage you to start thinking about it as soon as possible and make sure your project plan aligns. Moving on to focus on dollars. So what is ERA allocating to CET partnership this year? We're making up to $3 million Canadian available through this competition with a maximum of $1 million per project. To reflect the scale of technologies and projects that we're looking to support, there's also a minimum funding request of $250,000 Canadian. As mentioned earlier, our funding is provided on a one-to-one matching basis, and so we'll match your eligible project expenses dollar for dollar up to 50% of a project's total eligible costs. And of course, we'll also work closely with other funding organizations in Alberta, across Canada, and across the CET partnership and Horizon Europe to leverage our funding where possible and really, again, make sure those consortiums are eligible. In some cases, we may be able to share your proposal with our trusted funding partners to explore opportunities for additional funding beyond ERA's contribution, whether that's part of the CETP project or for future initiatives. So again, as you're thinking about putting your proposal together, that's a conversation we're always happy to have. I will say that CET partnership has specific regional requirements for the other funding partners as well. So you can find ERA's requirements and compare those to other funding partners' requirements, again, as part of the CETP website and the materials that you can download from there. A lot of the dollar requests and allocations are indicated in euros. So just to be specific, ERA's contributions here are all in CAD, and you will need to do that currency conversion when you submit your application. Just to hone in a little bit more on what ERA specifically is hoping to fund, as you probably heard in the module descriptions, CET partnership spans a very wide range of technology readiness levels and research, development, demonstration, and deployment activities. ERA's focus is a little bit more narrow than that, and I think it's really important to highlight again, if you're requesting funding from ERA for a project, the elements that you're requesting funding for should align with ERA's focused technology stages of development, but your whole project can span a wider range as aligns with the CETP guidelines. So what are those ERA focused stages of development? We're really looking at funding projects in the area of technology scale-up, field pilot, commercial demonstration, or commercial implementation. So they're described on the slide here, but broadly speaking, we're looking for the technology or innovation to be field tested in an operational environment, and that can include scale-up of prototypes to representative pilot scale and subsequent in-field testing of pilot units. So that's the earliest stage of development. As projects move forward, or you're already at a more advanced level, we'll be looking for commercial demonstrations. So that's projects and technologies that are approaching the final commercial product and representative systems that are already operational. And the type of project you'd be looking at would be demonstrating near or full commercial scale systems in that operational environment. Lastly, at the upper end of the range, we are also interested in first of kind commercial implementation, again, where your technology is very well matured, but has not yet had a first of kind deployment in Alberta. Projects in this category may involve the design, construction, and operation of the technology in its final commercial form, with the intent to operate the technology for its full commercial life. The stages of development are in line with technology readiness level stages 5 to 9, as used commonly by North American funding agencies. Again, if you have more questions about where your project might fit in ERA's range of eligible activities, please don't hesitate to reach out. Eligible applicants, who should apply and who's eligible for ERA funding under Clean Energy Transition Partnership? ERA is built on the philosophy that good ideas can come from anywhere, and so we're open to applications from just about any type of organization, whether that's industrial operators, small and medium-sized enterprises, Indigenous communities, universities, not-for-profit organizations, and others. And because good ideas can come from anywhere, applicants are not required to be Alberta-based, in this program especially, but actually in most of ERA's programs as well. What we really want to see you make a strong case for, especially if you're from outside of Alberta, is how your project and technology will benefit Alberta and that it solves a market need and addresses a real challenge here in the province. What we find is particularly interesting with the CET partnership projects is that oftentimes we have consortiums of researchers. Again, they may be Alberta-based, they may be outside of Alberta, with industry partners, again, to indicate that market pull. And the projects can do a great job of painting that picture of which activities will happen where, which parts of the application consortium will be leading them, and what the specific benefits are to Alberta. So again, even if a large part of your project is outside of Alberta, if you have local researchers, local industry, local technology partners at the table, that could still be enough to justify eligibility under this program. And again, we really encourage you to reach out to us and talk that through. The last thing I'll say on this slide again is, CETP again is all about fostering these consortiums and these positive partnerships and relationships. In addition to your international partners in the project consortium, working with Alberta-based organizations can help develop and retain talent, build innovation capacity, and deliver meaningful benefits to local communities. So please don't overlook that in your development of your consortium. So how do you submit your proposal? So CETP is administered by a council of administrators based in the EU, and they have a two-step procedure for submission and evaluation of projects that in many ways mirrors ERA's process, but does have some key differences. So I'll talk that through on this slide. First, applicants will submit a pre-proposal, which is a form that includes a project description, consortium partners data, team member overview, and a project budget. At this stage, the evaluators look to see if there's innovation in your project, if it's feasible to implement, and if you meet the eligibility requirements. So this very much aligns with ERA's typical expression of interest stage of our process. After the pre-proposal deadline, evaluators will invite successful participants to submit a full proposal. Again, very similar language to what ERA uses for the second stage of our process. Both stages of the proposal will be evaluated according to the main evaluation criteria for CETP, which are divided into three groups: excellence, impact, and quality and efficiency for implementation. To find out more about what's contained in each criteria area, please refer to Section 5 of the Joint Call Overview Guidelines. The full proposal may also include specific requirements for each evaluation criterion, information on intellectual property rights, data management, and risk analysis. I should note that each participating funding nation or region may require project applicants to submit supplemental information. So for ERA's part, we require applicants to submit detailed budgetary information, financial reports, a greenhouse gas benefits analysis, and additional information on alignment with the Alberta market. Again, all really focused on the Alberta content of the project with some room to expand on details for any activities that may happen outside Alberta. Again, it's really important that you review the guidelines and requirements on the CETP website, because while Alberta may have some requirements, other funding bodies from other nations or regions may have their own requirements and information that they're looking for you to submit. The other thing that's really important to note is that unlike a typical ERA funding call, you will need to apply to this program through the CET partnership website. They have their own application portal, again, as well as a matchmaking platform that you'll need to access in order to prepare and submit an application. The other important thing to mention is that CETP leads the evaluation and adjudication process, particularly for the pre-proposal stage. And so while you will be reviewed specifically by ERA as your proposal advances through the process, a big chunk of the decision-making and analysis happens at that CETP consortium level. And there's much more information on that provided in the guidelines if you're interested to learn more about that. Okay, just to recap the timelines for the funding process. The most important thing to be aware of is that the deadline for submitting pre-proposals is this October 9th, 2025 at 1400 hours Central European time. So again, if you're trying to submit at 2 p.m. Mountain Time in Alberta, you might already be too late. So please do keep an eye on that deadline. What we generally recommend for CETP, based on experience, is that applicants that are based in Alberta or Canada plan to submit the day before, just to ensure there's no possible hiccups with the time zones or anything of that nature. So for all intents and purposes, if you're based here, I would encourage you to consider October 8th your deadline and submit then, and that will avoid any last minute problems. Projects that are shortlisted will have from January to March of next year to generate and submit their full project proposal. And then successful applicants from that stage will be notified of their funding in mid-June of next year. So again, this is about a 12-month process from program launch until final decision. As noted previously, all projects will be required to initiate activities between September and December of 2026. My last slide before we open up questions is related to ERA's tips for preparing a successful submission. With a global funding opportunity like this, applicants really need to make a strong case for why their project should be funded. You're essentially competing against a global pool of applicants, and we know that you're participating in a program that has maybe slightly different rules and expectations and certainly requirements than other programs you may have accessed in Alberta, in Canada, or even elsewhere in North America. So it's really important that you start the process now. It takes time to forge international partnerships, get internal approvals, and allocate resources. And to be perfectly honest, it takes a long time to read those CETP guidelines as well, as they're quite extensive. So that's going to need to be your first stop. The further along you are in those processes, the better you will be at demonstrating that your project is real and ready to advance when you submit that pre-proposal. Since all submissions must be completed through the CETP online portal, please go there to register for an account if you don't already have one. Again, that's going to be your starting place and your hub for all information relating to matchmaking, eligibility requirements, and proposal content. Again, please do carefully read those joint call documents that are provided on the CETP program website. They have all the information that you'll need to submit your application. If you go to the Joint Call 2025 page, which again is linked, the documents are listed on the left-hand side of the page. One thing we always encourage folks to do is take a real close look at the eligibility criteria and merit criteria, because if you have a project that is not eligible or doesn't fit with this call up for proposals, or that simply won't meet some of the consortium requirements, you can save yourself a lot of time by reading those documents and figuring that out as soon as possible. The evaluation criteria are provided on page 22 of the call text document, again, which you can download from that website. And these are the criteria upon which each proposal will be evaluated and shortlisted. I will say again, this call has very specific requirements for the information you need to provide for each of those criteria, as well as specific requirements for the project consortium and applicant eligibility. So it's really important, again, that you review those criteria and requirements in depth and align your proposal and your project design to those criteria. So I can't stress enough that starting early, thinking through what a strong project will look like, emphasizing the Alberta content, and then aligning to those broader criteria will be your path to success in this program. And of course, our team and the CETP partnership team are happy to help you through the process as you go. With that, I think we have some time for questions. So if you've made it this far and you're still on the line, we'd love to hear from you. So please type your questions into the questions pane of the control panel, which is typically on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll try to answer those as best we can with our remaining time together this morning.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So far we have one question. It's asking us what we classify as a medium enterprise, whether that's less than 500 employees, and if enterprises with more than 500 employees are able to apply. I would say yes, enterprises with more than 500 employees are able to apply. Technically, for small and medium-sized enterprises, we categorize those SMEs as having less than 500 employees, but we accept all types of applicants for this call for proposals. We also have another question here about if there's a way to pitch an overall project to us and get a green light before submitting an application. I would say yes, to the extent where we would have about a half-hour call just to walk through, your project. We do not review applications, so please don't send us a proposal and ask us to review it. We can hear about your project and let you know if you're on the right track to actually apply to this call and whether it's something that ERA would potentially take a look at. But I will pass it over to Chris to see if he's got anything to add to that.
I think you've hit all the high points, Isabella. Again, we're not able to give you any feedback on a proposal in advance, but we can give you pointers on alignment. And certainly, I think in the past, we've been able to give people at least a little bit of a red light, green light of if something's clearly out of scope. We've been happy to tell people maybe this isn't the right program and direct you to one of our other funding programs. So that can be a great way to get a quick answer again, instead of going through the entire process only to get the no. Of course, I will stress that a lot of the evaluation and adjudication, both of eligibility and merit for this program, again, happen at that CETP consortium level. So ERA may give you somewhat of a green light and say, yep, this is well aligned with what we're looking for, but it's not a guarantee that your project will be accepted. By the same token, of course, that process is very well established and is great at finding strong projects with good merits. And so if you have a really strong opportunity, we have seen proponents with good success in this program. And again, we're happy to direct you as needed.
And just as a follow-up to that question, to what extent do the partnerships have to be solidified? I would say you need to have a consortium of partners when you apply to the call. So October the 9th is that pre-proposal deadline. You should have your consortium solidified at that point. And those that have that consortium solidified will then, if they're successful in their adjudication, will be invited to the full proposal phase. And I strongly encourage applicants to visit the matchmaking platform on the CET partnership website to find out a little bit more on different partners. So ERA does not play a matchmaking role, so please don't come to us and ask us to find a partner for you. We will just direct you to that matchmaking platform. Question here around digital and automation. So whether Internet of Things and software projects that deal with energy management, if they would qualify. From my standpoint, I would say take a look at the guidelines. ERA's mandate is focused on looking at projects that have real outcomes at the end of the project. So if you can demonstrate a line of sight from those technologies to reduction of emissions or improvement of environmental benefits, then it's something we would take a look at. Chris, did you want to add on?
The only thing I'll add is that the different call modules, again, that you can access on the website are quite detailed in their description of what the CETP consortium members see as the technical needs and the opportunities that are out there. I do believe digital solutions and Internet of Things could align with a number of those outcomes that they're pursuing, particularly for a couple of the different modules. So it'll really just depend on the specifics of your technology. And to Isabella's point, how well you can connect the implementation of your technology to those outcomes that the program is searching. So again, guidelines are a great place to start, but that's something we can certainly discuss with you one-on-one if you'd be looking for more guidance.
All right, now we have project timelines. So as outlined, projects must begin between September 26th to December 2026. So we have a question here: if projects would be considered if they started in early to mid 2027 due to internal deadlines or project approval deadlines. From ERA's standpoint, we can typically look at this. However, we're not the only funding organization that's part of this call. So it's really important to look at the transnational requirements for the CET partnership call, the joint call as a whole, as well as the individual national requirements for the participating consortium members. If there are project activities that other members are undertaking between September and December of 2026, then I believe it would be eligible. However, projects that begin later than that would not be eligible from the whole CET joint call standpoint.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is I think folks that have applied to ERA's processes before know that we can be quite flexible with things like project timelines. Again, given this is a consortium-based call with a number of other partners providing requirements, there is not necessarily that flexibility at the top level of the program. So what I would encourage you to do is to be creative about the work plan you're presenting. It's okay if substantial work doesn't start until 2027, as long as you can show some activity to get the project going. We have seen that and consortium issues be the sort of sole reason for projects being rejected under CETP in the past. So I'd really encourage you just to put forward a proposal and again, think a little bit creatively about how you can align with those requirements.
All right, another question we have is whether EU participants need to participate in funding the project or whether they need to or whether they can just participate in the research. I would say there's always going to be a primary research funding partner that you're going to apply to. So if you're applying to ERA for funding, we could fund a portion of that project up to 50%. However, there are other national requirements that you would need to be aware of. So again, our recommendation is to read the national and transnational guidelines, but we have seen instances where other partners can participate as research partners. However, we do need to see some support, whether that's cash or in-kind funding support from different funding partners. So please keep in mind, if you are concerned about whether your project costs meet the eligible costs from ERA and from other partners, just come and talk to us and we can potentially work through any challenges that you might have and answer any questions, as well as direct you to the right teams in the CET partnership platform. All right, next question here. Can we confirm whether project funding is available beyond the ERA funding, so total pool of $3 million, i.e. can funding from EU funding organizations be accessed in addition to the EU funding?
Just trying to make sure I understand the question. I think it's related to the total amount of funding you can apply for in the program. So yes, so the reality is ERA's contribution is capped at the limits that we've talked about in this call. Typically what we'd see in CETP projects is as well funding from other funders within that partnership. Ideally 3, as we've noted, is the requirement. And so your total funding that you may be requesting from CETP joint call could in fact exceed ERA's maximum for the program. Again, what we'll be looking for you to do is break down those individual contributions and show, okay, we're requesting maybe $1 million from ERA, which aligns with our guidelines, maybe $1 million from another EU affiliated country, and then $1 million from somewhere else. And that could give you up to 3 million, for example, on your project. And again, I'm just pulling numbers. Some of the other funding partners do have higher maximum allocations. And again, that'll depend on how well aligned your activities of your project and your partnerships are with that country. But there is the opportunity to access a fair bit more than ERA's allocation if your project is well aligned with some of those other funders in the call.
We had another question here that states, if a company is based in Alberta and has a partner from Australia or the United States, are they eligible to apply for the CET partnership funding, or is it necessary to have at least one partner from a European country? So as outlined in our consortium requirements, there must be 3 beneficiary partners, including the one main coordinator or lead applicant, from a minimum of 3 different countries participating in the call module. So you have to take a look at your call module first, whichever one you're applying to. 2 of those partners, at least 2 of those partners must be EU member states or Horizon Europe associated countries. And there is a list of those on the CET partnership joint call website. So please take a look at those. Canada is part of the Horizon Europe consortium. I would say take a look at those, and that should answer that question there. Now, is a sole proprietor company where a single individual owns and operates the business eligible for the application? Yes, absolutely. Where we run into challenges is if there is a consortium of partners applying to our calls, and they want to apply just as one, we do need to see a lead applicant. So we need to see one application come through, and because ultimately ERA does contract with that one applicant organization. So absolutely, sole proprietor can come through, but where we get into some challenges is if we see a consortium applying together, we do need to end up contracting with one entity. So just be mindful of that when you are applying. What TRLs do we support, or technology readiness levels? Chris?
For sure. So as mentioned a couple slides back, we are looking at a pretty wide range here. In fact, the CETP partnership range is very wide, all the way from research and development and sort of studies and modeling, all the way up to pilots, prototyping, commercial demonstrations, and first of kind commercial implementation. Typically under ERA funding, we're looking a little bit later in that range, so starting around the field pilots and implementation. But I'd say again, for Clean Energy Transition Partnership, we're actually fairly flexible on the type of project that can come through. Really what's more important than where you start on the project is how much you're advancing the technology towards commercialization. There may be a project that starts at a fairly early TRL, but gets to a meaningful, field pilot or prototype by the end of that project. We'd be happy to consider that. There may be projects that start at a very high TRL and only advance one level, from pre-commercial to commercial, for example, and we're happy to see that too. So it is quite a broad spectrum here. I guess really what the key thing is that you're focused on commercialization of technology as opposed to, again, sort of fundamental research. So that, TRL 1 and 2 is probably not where we want to go with our funding on this call. But again, it's really helpful to talk about specifics of a project, and that's something we'd be happy to engage with one-on-one.
All right, next question here. Can we please elaborate on the industry requirements? I would say for this call here, industry can form part of the project. They can be a strategic entity, but as Chris mentioned, we do like to see some confirmation from industry that there is demand, that they are looking for the technology or solution that is being advanced. So cash contribution or in-kind contribution is preferred. And so this does really help solidify their involvement in the project and helps with our one-to-one match requirement for some of these eligible projects. So what we do want to stay away from is, having an entire project funded or asked for with, say, a $3 million budget and $1.5 million is, for example, coming from other government sources. That is not something that we would match our funding to. So we really need to see that industry or private funding match. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions here. We'll leave this up for another minute or two. But again, if you think of another question that you haven't heard of today, or it comes to you after this webinar, please contact our applications team. That's applications@eralberta.ca. We'd be happy to answer any additional questions you may have. The slides and the webinar with audio, as well as this Q&A session, will be posted to our website in the coming days here. So waiting for those last few questions to come in. Are residential projects eligible?
I am going to read a little bit into your question and assume you're speaking about deployment of technologies for residential buildings. So that could be the heating and cooling module. It could be the clean energy integration module. The short answer is yes. So when we say industry or private sector partnerships, those could include, for example, home builders. It could include residential building owners, for example, if it's multifamily residential. So we have seen projects come through both our regular funding calls and these joint calls that align with that sector. And we'd certainly be happy to see projects come forward in this year's program as well.
All right, another question here about subscription. Have ERA CETP calls been fully subscribed in the past? I would say we have seen a healthy share of applicants to these calls. However, we do look for additional applicants coming forward each year. So I would say, put your best foot forward. It is, we have limited insight into that adjudication process. Unfortunately, it is all done at the CETP transnational level. However, we will help you navigate the application process, find the information that you need, and ultimately help prepare you for a successful submission if you're asking ERA funds for this project.
The only thing I'll add to that, Isabella, is, unlike our other funding calls, this program does have some pretty specific requirements, as I think we've been talking about. And so typically the volume that ERA sees on these calls is lower than our typical funding program. What that means is that from an ERA perspective, we're really excited to get as many applicants in the door as possible. And so you probably do have a decent chance of success, again, on the ERA side, if you're able to put forward an eligible project. As Isabella said, we don't have as much insight and control over the decisions that happen at that transnational level. So that's where we have, in the past, sometimes not been able to actually fully allocate our funds in this call. But that's part and parcel of working in this environment. And so again, we're happy to make the funds available and to work with applicants to help them, have the best chance of success.
All right, so our recommendations, again, review the guidelines and supporting material online, including ERA's eligible costs and expense guidelines. I would say this is one area where we see applicants fall short in their pre-proposals, is asking ERA for things that are ineligible. So please make sure you review those guidelines, review ERA's requirements into projects that we would fund, and the activities of those projects that we fund. Email your remaining questions to our applications team. So that's applications@eralberta.ca. We look forward to seeing some strong submissions, and we wish everyone good luck. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of your day.